Hello, I just wanted to make this video just to go through some of the images that I kind of produced for the elemental archetypes that Tammo and his colleagues came up with. And uh, you probably have seen these original images before, which Tammo painted, if you've been interested in this work. If you haven't seen them yet, probably the best place to find the reproductions of the images is in a book by Magenta Wise, and I will put the link to that in the description. I'm just trying to think what it was called. Something like "Live from Your Center" or something like that, but I'll put it in the thing. Um, let's see. There are other artworks for it as well, which you can find in a book by, uh, well, it's produced and it's published by Simon Benedict Smith, who used to be known as Hereward Gabriel, who was one of the Green Monks who lived and worked with Tammo at the monastery in North London. And that's called Natural Psychology. I think it's something like a model of human beings or something based on the elements. Yeah. Um, what else is there that you could look at? If you can find The Purpose of Love secondhand by Richard Gardner, that's got reproductions of the original paintings in there as well. And there are various other depictions of these archetypes in a book called The Future Will Be Green by the Venerable Anelog, who was also Tammo Jongh, and Brother Sebastian, who was another one of the Green Monks. And I don't think that's in print anymore. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's in print or not. But you can probably pick up some, at least second-hand copies, if not new copies. You can probably find them either through Amazon or through things like Abe Books or what have you. The second-hand book sites. But anyway, that's the sort of like the background to this. Now, we've been working on this for some time. Me and some other people sort of like meeting up together online and working with things, looking at these um, archetypes, yeah. And as I am a painter, it's sort of like it's of particular interest to me, the sort of like the artistic side of it. And what I've done is I've tried to come up with my own versions of these to see how they would express for me and how I could do this, and also so that there will be some images that I could use quite freely, in terms of anything I want to put out there. I believe Magenta Wise says that she has copyrights to all the original images and everything. Yeah, so and like I said, if you want to find those things, probably her book is probably the best uh, in print representation of those images and things. Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to go through the images that I've come up with to see, if you'd be interested in them. And I will go through them just in the order that I painted them in, more or less, because sometimes they were started and then they were redone at a later stage, but I'll try and do them in the order that they were started in anyway. Yeah. Now, the first one was the nymph. I've called it the nymph. It was originally called the child. Some people called it the angel, but I've called it the nymph. And this is water and air, and it has that very light feel to it because air is its inner element, and that's where it's coming from, basically. I wanted to do this archetype though as something other than a child. Yeah, I wanted to show this archetype as something that was able to grow up. Yeah, and so the nymph actually is a nymph, and in this is an adult figure. The nymph is not quite as innocent a figure as, say, the child would suggest, yeah. And the nymph has quite a lot of things to it, yeah. It's the it's the archetype which I believe actually is part of my persona, yeah, in terms of Tammo's looking at things, what he called the personal self, yeah. One of my friends said that there was something almost like a little bit bruised about this kind of like image, and I think that's maybe not accidental. Uh, uh, there is sensitivity and a vulnerability to this archetype, yeah, even in adults, yeah, and uh, yeah, there's a certain amount to it there, which probably has carries a little bit of that with it, yeah. But that's my picture of the nymph of water and air. The next one I did was the patriarch, which is air and water. Um, I'm pleased with this one. I think it shows this almost like this sort of like very vertical orientation. Yeah. Um, those are meant to be snowflakes rather than stars, but I guess they could be either. Yeah. And uh, I definitely wanted to bring through the water element because water is where he's coming from. It's his inner element. Yeah. So that was my a representation of the patriarch. The next one I did was the matriarch, and this is earth and air. Um, I did her against a sort of desert background, a very arid desert background. Um, the sort of chest in the background is like has lots and lots of drawers in it and things, and so it has this sense of being a place where lots of things are stored and filed away. Yeah, which I think is quite characteristic of her, very ordering and organising. Um, and the little gold coins, I think it shows her association with wealth and this sort of thing, and there's the mercantile. Yeah, but it's kind of like it's quite arid, maybe quite forbidding in some ways. Uh, but basically, she's just kind of like obviously somebody who's got through a lot, you know, and she hasn't done it by accident. Yeah. Now the next one was uh, the Hearth Priestess, and this was one that took me a long time to do. Um, it took me a long time to do, uh, and it's interesting uh, because the Hearth Priestess, which is earth and fire, was originally called the slave, and some people have called it the mother, and it gets quite confusing the number of different terms it's had for it. I called it Hearth Priestess though, and I feel that works for me. The hearth fire is the center of the home. It's the center of our civilization in a sense, yeah. And this is what she tends and guards in a sense. And it's there's a lot of things to this, you know. There's a lot of things to this particular archetype. This is the one which be associated with my essential self, and it's one which I didn't think was going to be that difficult for me to do, because it is. It's one that I relate to. Uh, but it turned out it's quite hard for me. And I think that's because the essential self may be where we store things like childhood traumas and things like that. And so it took me some time to get through this. I mean, the first image was just a kind of like a representation of the ideas, really, of uh, of the Hearth Priestess, yeah. And I think it represented something okay, but it um, wasn't particularly didn't look like a person in the way that the other ones I painted had looked like a person. It looked like a symbol. I then tried to do another one in acrylics, and I was pretty pleased with it. Um, you could probably recognize, if you know the history of some things about modern magic, you could probably uh, recognize this was based upon, in part, upon the figure of Layla Waddle, who was one of Crowley's Scarlet Women. Yeah. So um, that was okay, but it was still not so much. Uh, what I wanted. And then I went through a whole series of ones which certainly were more a person, and they were kind of okay and they were interesting, but I kept on wanting to rework them and rework them and rework them until it became okay. That's all right. But then when I looked at it, it's like this isn't what I really want either, you know, because it just looked like it was wearing a mask almost somehow by the end of it. So, make of that what you will. Um, Again, there was the fire, though the fire was being guarded, but there was also this sense of fire behind her because she's actually is an elemental force, though, as well. Yeah. Um, and being fire and earth, she's coming from the place of fire. Um, in the end, I managed to do a another version which I settled upon, and this probably is the final one. And here, it just seemed to come through more simply. She looks almost slightly unformed. She looks like she's made of clay. She looks, but there's a basic feel to it, which is I think is right. It's at rest, it's ease, in a way, and there is that fire coming from from deep within, in a sense. So that's the one I settled for in the end. The next one I did was the actress. This was very simple, very easy to do, really, as far as I was concerned. Um, I think it shows a lot of both art and artifice in it, which I think is characteristic of the art of the actress. Um, she is an archetype of passion, and I think this shows um, like a lot of creativity, uh, uh, but like I said, there's a lot of artifice to it as well. Yeah, and a lot of self-possession in a sense. Yeah, and so that's how I did the actress. Next, I was worked on the warrior. I did a few different versions for this. The first one was I think it was okay, but it was like showing somebody in a kind of like with these horns, which I thought were quite important to put in there, and to put it as a kind of a very muscular figure with um, a quite, I suppose, a quite aggressive stance in a sense, a quite sort of defiant stance. And I thought that was probably pretty important. And then I thought, well, I want to again make it more personal, and what I chose was essentially a representation almost of a giant looking down, because giants are part of the warrior sort of like association, like these sort of like giants, these sort of like unwieldy, highly powerful mythical creatures. Yeah. So that was how I did that, and I finally though settled upon a a slightly more human-looking version of the same thing with a little bit more subtlety to it, I think, and that was my warrior. Finally, the next one I moved on to was Mother Nature, and I started off doing Mother Nature in a very much almost as a sort of symbolic figure, um, and um, I gave her a kind of veil, yeah, which I thought was important because nature is a mystery. Um, I put some wheat at one side and a skull at the other, which was kind of like life and death, and the association with death is important, I think, yeah, um, and between sort of like Mother Nature and this cycle of life and death, yeah. And I also wanted to have a sort of crown, and it ended up that the crown becoming a kind of like a green color, yeah. Um, I was pretty happy with that in some ways, but again, it was a very, very symbolic figure, and I felt like I needed to have a more personable, in a sense, image, which would be more in tune with the others in some sense, more that looked like an actual person. And so then I did I came up with this image, which shows a figure sleeping, and the sense here is of this is the figure slipping into dream, and there's the skull there, but it's an animal skull, which I was quite happy with, because there's something about Mother Nature which is very, very previous to humanity and will be after it as well, if you see what I mean. And there was some greenery there, but I wanted to have the blue, and I wanted to be there a sense of water. So the water for me was partly in the sense of that blue colour there, which would give a sense of wateriness, but also in the sense of slipping into dream, which was watery as well. So that was Mother Nature for me. I then painted the Fool. The Fool was a very easy and quick one to do. It just was just came out immediately, just exactly like that. Kind of spontaneous, rather a little bit outrageous. And that's how the Fool worked for me, really. It was very, very quick. Very quick, and did quite nicely, really, I think. I'm fine with that. It was a very, very immediate incursion in that way, so I was happy with that. The Magician. The Magician, I painted as a figure almost in a sense blinded by the light, in a sense, yeah, because I think that's very characteristic of the Magician. The light is so bright that it kind of blinds you to other things, and there's very much this separation between light and dark, and out of that light side comes all of these symbolic representations with basically writing, alphabets, symbols, all these things, which actually can all be swapped around to give different meanings, and can sort of like slip to give different meanings, yeah. And that ambiguity is, I think, quite important to the Magician, and the things that it opens up in terms of meaning and the ambivalence of meaning, I think, is quite important for the Magician somehow to show that. But it definitely brings this brilliant light with it also. I coloured him in fiery colours to show that he's coming from fire, even though he's an air archetype, yeah, because he is air and fire. The Enchantress. This again was a quick one to do. I noticed here that her face seems to reflect the moon, in a sense. She's painted in that kind of fairly sad kind of like quality, certainly with a lot of feeling, yeah, and a certain sadness. And her neck and body, I think there's a certain sense that her neck and body almost form a sort of like a landscape, almost like there's almost like a horizon in there somewhere, yeah, and that shows that her root is in earth. Earth is her inner element, yeah, and so that's how that one came out. Came out about very, very simply, very quickly. The Sage, which is air and earth. I wanted to show mountains in there. I wanted the sage to appear almost a bit skeletal, really sexless, highly impassive, and so he has this very, very dry quality, and he's almost seems to be almost transparent, as if he's almost not there, really, which I think is characteristic of the sage in a way. Is very, very detached. The mountain tops are kind of an association of him for me, and I wanted to have these ambiguous like blue shapes in this sort of like in the sky, so you can't tell, are they kind of like gaps in the cloud, are they UFOs, because there's something very alien about him as well, and so there was that little blue dot in his forehead as well, so there's this sense of whatever that is, that capacity is there, whether you call it enlightenment or detachment or whatever it is, or just being completely alien, you know, um, it's there, and so that's how I did the um, the sage, and he came through very quickly in that way. And uh, lastly, the jester. Now, the jester, I started off with a figure which I really didn't like. It looks quite cartoonish, but I wanted to play on the sort of fallen angel quality there. He's fire and air, so he's very fiery, but he's coming from a place of air, yeah. So the idea of the fallen angel was kind of interesting, but I really disliked the image I'd done there, yeah. And when I did him again, he came through as almost like a face coming through this sheet of flame, um, and he has what I think is a very jesterish, tricksy face, um, very kind of used car salesman of the soul type of idea, yeah. Um, but he himself, although he's coming through this flame, he himself appears like has this airy, pure quality coming through there in his face, yeah. Um, and the birds, the Escher birds, I put in there to again reinforce the sense of the air, but also a sense of paradox, which I think is quite characteristic of the gesture as well. Anyway, that's my little set of paintings. Um, they've done over, I'm not sure how long they were done over, a period of time. Some of them came through quite quickly and some of them took a longer. But anyway, I hope you found that of interest.